Sawadi krab. Good morning to the audience on Facebook Live, and welcome to a panel discussion today on design, engineering, and innovation. And this is one of the 3 panels. I think this is the 2nd episode already that aim to foster and enhance synergies among science networks in Asia and the Pacific. And today's panel is organized by Thai Young Scientists Academy, or THAISA, and supported by United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization in Jakarta, and National Science Museum, Thailand, and SM here. And today we have 4 distinguished guests that will share the panel together. And so why don't the 4 speakers give the short introduction about yourself, maybe a name or nickname. Well, nickname is a Thai thing, you know, and a few sentences about what you do or expertise. So why don't we start with Kun Pei krab.
Actually, mechanical engineer, but I have been moving toward design innovations and have started my own company using drone to fly around to take pictures of building, of structure, and create 3D models of it, and using 3D AI analysis to analyze structural change or any progress tracking.
Oh, awesome, awesome. So I think second we'll start with Kevin, please.
Hi, I'm Kevin. I was a software engineer for 2 years, and then I freelanced for a couple of years, and now I'm in global innovation design at the RCA. And I'm actually in a semester studying in Tokyo right now, except it's all on Zoom. But very nice to meet everyone.
Yeah, next, please, Kun Sasi krab.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Sasitorn Srisawadi, or I can go by Sasi because that's easier. And right now, I'm a researcher at the National Metal and Materials Technology Center in Thailand. So basically, I just do research, and my background is on engineering. So in particular, I'm working on the research on 3D printing technology and other development of new materials.
Awesome. And then last, we have Luisa, please.
Hi, I'm Luisa. I have a background in interaction design and film. My work has always kind of existed at the intersection of art and science, so I've made interactive installations for the Science Museum, Science Gallery, London Design Festival, and now the National Science Museum in Thailand. And I started transitioning into engineering through special effects in film, so I've worked on things like Star Wars, Jurassic World, and the latest Marvel's Doctor Strange.
Awesome. I think today we have a variety of guests here. We have Kun Pei from drone technology, we have Kevin from software engineering, we have Kun Sasi as a researcher for MTech, and here we have Luisa from film making industry, and I am Dr. Udom, or Dr. Paul from National Center for Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology, Thailand, and I'll be your host here. So let's get started. So today we have a topic of design, engineering, and innovation. And the first thing when people hear the word, including me of course, that about the word design, we think of art, we think of fashion maybe, which is great. But I feel like it's more than that, especially when we have this group of experts here. So why don't we start with Kun Pei? Can you share your definition, or maybe give us a stage of what this design really means for you?
I think design have a very, very different meaning in the West and in the East. A lot of people in the East may be familiar with designer as a fashion designer or graphic designer, like more artistic, while I think designer are more toward problem solving. So I have a background in engineering. Engineers solve problem, but a technical problem, thing doesn't work, how you put things together, how you make it work. Well, I think designers think a lot more on people. Not only how it works, but how people can use it. How would people prefer to use things? So I think it's more of a problem solver that have people as a center of their mindset. I think that would be a better definition for a designer for me. An innovator is even slightly bit broader, because innovator can be innovating, creating new product or service, or it could be innovating in creating new business model. So it's like a bit broader in coming up with new things, new way of using the old things, but it can be applied in multiple definitions for multiple industry, let's say it that way.
Awesome. I think that gives us, thank you for the answer. And I think we can start from that, because now we have seen that engineering and design, they are not too far apart as we first think or our impression. So can you, I think we can continue with Pei, that how can you start your maybe career or your path, a journey on the design engineering based on your own experience and you know what you do? Yeah.
So for me, to begin with, like when I was very young, I am very good at more design, more artistic things. But then I'm also good at mathematics as well, and that's kind of like why I choose to go more engineering routes. But after I was working for a while, solving technical problem was very fun. But I think I want to do more than just straightforward making things work. And I'm always looking out to see like how people interact with the things that I made. And that's kind of like gradually opened me up to a course that is a mix of design engineering. And I'm going in with full on like design mindset. But from there, I learned to think differently, learn to not put myself as the center of solving the problem, but learn to solve problem purely for other people who I may not have any experience or know how that field look like. And that's kind of like where it shifts. And the moment of breakthrough is when I do my dissertations or like my final presentations. And I look into the use of how it would be easier to control drone or robots. And I end up create a magic wand that you can point at the drone and move it in the air, like Harry Potter. Because technical perspective, that is very, very hard. It's very hard to learn how to control a robot or a drone. But interaction-wise, as a normal people who don't want to go like technical stuff, you can also do that as well. You want to be able to point and go, and I enable that to be able to do it using like hardcore computer vision technology, VR, AR, machine learning, and everything behind the scene. And I think that's kind of when I find my sweet spot of this is what I like, making super cool tech, deep tech, hardcore, but also people who have no interest in technology also think it's super easy and simple to use. And I built this kind of like interactive 3D model to enable all the engineer that can use it to do inspections and modeling without the need of actually knowing what the technology is behind it.
Oh, awesome. Now, very good, because I think that's a great point, because when we talk about computer engineering or software, you think of hardcore coding maybe, and now you bring in the interaction with people, which is a key component. So I think Kevin has an experience on that for sure. Why don't you share with us what about your experience?
Yeah, I was just gonna hop in and respond to Pei too. Like, I think it's really, honestly, like really beautiful that you found the connection between design and engineering, and you really have this like practice where I feel like they inform each other, because I think I'm still really finding that as a designer. Yeah, just like in my experience, I think earlier we talked about too, like a lot of engineers are sort of very design adjacent. And especially in the industry I worked in, I was doing like front-end web software for Facebook. But a lot of that work, when you work on like front-end especially, you do implicitly, you're doing design, like you're doing interaction design, you're doing UX design, and often you also work with the designer, so you learn to empathize with them. But really, like, there's so many parts of engineering that are very designy, that's just the education isn't there. Like for me, in school, I never learned that what I was doing was design, but when you sit down to do a specification document, you sit down and plan out what is it going to do, you do user testing, you survey users, all that kind of stuff that goes into a software project. In my experience, like, I just needed to find the language. Like after a couple years of working, or after I had a lot of friends working in product design, like I came to understand that really I was doing some kind of design. I just wasn't being intentional about it. And I think there's a lot of people in engineering who will go through that same experience. Yeah.
Oh, that's true. That's true. I mean, we see something that it's easy to use, but actually there's a lot of work behind that. That's for sure.
Yeah, exactly. There's like when I was at Facebook, we had these like user testing rooms with like the double blind mirror, where you could like watch someone use your interface, and it was like we were all getting a little crash course in how to run that. But what I really wish that we had done, and I really wish that like more software companies like in Silicon Valley did this, is like they were explicit about doing that. Like they, instead of just showing up in a meeting room and being like, oh, we're watching the user use the interface now, just getting a little bit more of like an education and like what are you looking for and why and whether or not, like how you should respond to how a user uses your interface and how to understand what to make and what they want and interpret how they speak too. Like actually, yeah, there's this quote my professor this past week, he repeated at me, which I actually really don't like Henry Ford, but the quote was like, if I asked people what they wanted, like I would have given them, they would have asked for like a faster horse or whatever. And yeah, there's really two sides to this coin, so it'd be really interesting to hear everyone speak about this, but like sometimes, you know, you want to go and ask the user and the people who are going to use it and understand like what they're going to use it for. And sometimes you also need to like interpret what they're saying, you know, and like really hear. I think people will talk about the problem, but you have to like really tease out their motivations and the pain points and all that, and like come up. That's what design is like to me, like finding that solution and hearing the right things, I suppose. Yeah.
Wow, actually that sounds like a lot of psychological part as well behind that.
Yeah. I texted my cousin this weekend, and I told him I was working on this project on sexism in Chinese characters actually, and he was like, it sounds like sociology. And I was like, yeah, like I feel like a lot of people maybe are missing that part where like design, Pei talked about this too, like where it's like, it means something aesthetic to them. Especially I feel like my cousin is Chinese, and I feel like it's an Asian context that it's like graphic design or just aesthetics, and it really is like sociology, psychology. It's a really crazy melding of a lot of different things. Yeah.
Awesome. Now, I think I would like to move to Luisa, because you say about, you know, when you design and then you need to kind of, I would say, touch people's mind or heart. And I think film industry, for sure, have to do that to appear artistic and also convey some message. So what can you, what design and engineer into the film industry? Can you share with us, please?
Wow, there is so much in there. I'd say that I've had quite a similar background to Pei in that I had such interest in both sciences and maths and also art and design and drama at school. And it was that sort of thing that people didn't necessarily understand went together. But like Kevin was saying, like there is so many skills and ideas that intersect between design and engineering. So a lot of the time the goals are the same, but the ways of thinking about it are different. So one definition of design that we use quite a lot on global innovation design is considering design to be a tool of transition from an existing state to a preferred state. And within artistic practices, you can sit there, you can design things all you like, you can think about people. Like you said, there's a lot of different intersections, especially within interaction design. There's a lot of psychology, understanding people and understanding people's motivations and how people interact with the world around them. But by the time you get into actual difficult real life problems, you need a whole nother skill set to be able to actually make real world change. So for me, that's where the engineering side came into my artistic practice, was trying to think about how do I use maths and how do I use science and how do I use logic to bring real life and to make actual change from the things that I'm designing. And within design, people used to work within these very segmented teams. So you might have the group of graphic designers and the group of communication designers, and everyone would work on their own. And then it started moving further towards multidisciplinary teams. So you might have a graphic designer working alongside a filmmaking, working along someone who works in interactions. And now you're starting to see people realizing that, okay, multidisciplinary teams are great, but what about multidisciplinary teams of multidisciplinary individuals, where every single combination of a design team will bring completely different solutions because it changes the way that you think about things once you have these different skill sets and these different learning sets. And it's also really interesting listening to Kevin talk about people looking for a faster horse because, like he said, there are these two different sides of the coin. Like when you're working on specifically like co-design projects, which we'll touch on a bit later, you need to really understand what the user actually needs. So you can listen to them and you have to listen to them. You have to be a very empathetic person. You have to really understand what they feel like they need. But you also need to try and do field research. You need to go and try and experience life alongside them, which again is something that you can borrow from acting, for example. You get a lot of method actors who try and live life alongside the people that they're trying to play. And then you also should read up about the subject and do your own secondary research and see what experts have said about it. And you need to take all of that information and try and build up this complete picture of what the problem is that you're trying to solve. So I would say being a designer, and especially being a design engineer, does mean that you are often putting yourself in the place of a psychologist, putting yourself in the place of a scientist and doing experimentation, putting yourself in the place of the designer, as an engineer, of an actor, of whoever you need to be to try and best get that job done. And sometimes this is where a lot of tension comes from, because you know that you will never be as much of a psychologist as someone who just does psychology, and you will never be as much of a scientist as someone who only does science. So you need to learn how to navigate these different spaces and work alongside so many different types of people and learn as many different skills as you can and try and bring your own unique perspective to whatever problem that you're attempting to solve.
Yeah, there's such a, like, I think Lisa says so many interesting things. I have a couple of things I wanted to respond to, but like, there's such a fine line of trying, you know, going out there and being like, I'm really going to understand this problem, and really like design. I think sometimes has had kind of a savior history where it's like, I'm going to go and solve this, and I think the right approach is to try to really listen and distill what people are saying without like speaking over them and without misrepresenting them. And that's really, I think a lot of what Luisa said is about like, design is kind of like a mindset. And to me, like that's how it feels to me, like being able to kind of empathize, but also like realize that you won't ever be like you said, like the sociologist or whatever. But also like having a really strong visualizing skill, or just being able to like contextualize or conceptualize something. Yeah, and the other thing that I wanted to respond to is that like, Lisa mentioned that like teams are being built with like more multidisciplinary people now, and like I think that's awesome. I don't know how much this is happening at like, you know, Facebook, like companies I used to work at in Silicon Valley, but I do know when I was there, Facebook is a really engineering-driven company, and the engineers are doing the design. And there's a designer on like every team. It's like 5 to 10 engineers per designer, but because nobody is like very multidisciplinary in that context, like the designer is just having such a hard time, like pushing back on everything being built, and engineers are doing design like while they're building things, and the designer is just really fighting for themselves. It's like, and I think it really reflects in the products that come out, right? Like you really see how Facebook is just testing everything in their platform, like just all the features, like, and really kind of just like taking features from other platforms. And I think it's really because they're not listening to the designers, and the designers have to do so much fighting just to be heard. Yeah, and it's very a product design, like specific context, but you can really see the differences in companies that have a product vision and the ones that kind of maybe don't. Yeah.
Yeah. Then it seems like, at least what my impression is that this is very challenging. Now I'd like to turn to Sasi, because, well, I'm sure that the research that you work on, that's when people talk about research and material science, that's very challenging already. So how can you put into this interaction with people or designing part into your own expertise, and how do you use it?
So thank you for like being very excited about my research.
Of course,
but after I listened to 3 of my three of my colleagues that share their point based on their experience. I wish I learned that like 10 years ago because I already did something like a mistake, and then I learned it in a hard way that a combination of skills and fields of expertise is actually the best way to get things done like most efficiently. Like, but basically, as a researcher, having two areas of expertise or skill to mix together and then collaborate is not something that's very new. So like at the very beginning of my career, I got to travel to the southern part of Thailand, and then I met like farmers in the rubber cultivation community, and I had a discussion with them like casually, but then they kept complaining like the rubber price is very low, they cannot even pay the tuition for their children. So from the researcher point of view, I thought, okay, we need to increase the value of whatever they're making. So, and then I mixed that with my background, which is the 3D printing. So I thought, okay, let's make the material printable because no one has ever done that in the world, and I'm going to be the first one to do that. And then I went back to MTech, my office, and then I had a discussion with one of my colleagues. She is a material scientist. So she has a very diverse experience with rubber material in particular. And we had like a lot of discussions, experiments. But I think what we did wrong was we focused too much on the technology without listening. So I already got that sentence from the farmers that, okay, they need the price to be higher. And then I just took that sentence and developed everything over and over by ourselves in a research lab. So I just want to show a picture here. That's our that's our workpiece that we got printed.
That's rubber.
Yes, that's 100% rubber, and I think we are one of the very first one in the world to be able to print that out of the rubber materials. So we were very, very excited, and so, but we don't really know what to do with that. I know. I mean, like, okay, so now we able to print it, but then what? So I went to one of the pitching sessions at NASDA, my office, and so I was like very excited and all about my research. And it's like, okay, we are the very first one to print this, and this material can be stretched up to 7 times. Like what I'm gonna show here is
you have a prototype.
Yes.
Piece of work here. Pretty
so
small,
it's gonna be a little bit harder to see. So this is what we printed out of the rubber. It's 100% rubber, and it has like complex geometry. I'm not sure would the camera be able to see it, but yeah. So I went to a pitching session. It's like, you can use this and you can design anything, stretch it up to 7 times. That's amazing. And they were like, so what? What do I do with that 7 times? What do I do with that 7 times stretchier material? And I was like, it's 7 times, it's very flexible. And people still don't get it, and I didn't even get it why they didn't get it. So that's the main problem. But then I got luckier later on because I realized later that designing the product is also a biggest part. Once you develop the technology, you just need to know what you want to do with that. So I went to see another one of my colleagues. I was so lucky, and she was trying to design artificial muscle, and she was looking for like a person who could provide her the flexible material, but also can incorporate like complex geometry and like other customizable properties. And I was looking for someone to use my material. So that was actually a good match, and I got luckier later, and that's when I learned like, you need to like keep your eyes and your ears open and listen to other people, and then you will eventually find a strength of your technology along with the applications, and that's how the innovation starts.
I think it's fair to say that the designing aspect is actually embedded or is in everything that we are doing: research, film, drone, software, everywhere. I think that's fair. I think it's emphasized even more the important part of this panel. So I'd like to actually move to the next question. The next question will be is that now I think the audience already get some ideas on the designing, engineering. So what about the current situation or the trends of, I would say, career, or what is the trend in your respective industry in terms of design engineering? Do people really need design engineering, and and anything or challenging in your own industry? And I'd like to start with Khun Pei, because she has a startup, and I think you hit to the point for sure.
I think nowadays people around the world, including in Asia as well, are looking for people with like multidisciplinary skills.
Yeah.
Before this, it might be slightly bit harder because most people are looking for like an engineer, an artist, graphic designer, an accountant. But I think with the world that is changing, people looking for multidisciplinary skill, especially a lot of startup, where you start a business with like 3 people. 3 people need to be able to do literally everything that is needed for a company. So that is more space and more need toward design engineers, but they might not say it or using these exact words and the job descriptions. And a lot of very hardcore engineering firms are trying to bring in design thinking into their firm and their team. And they know they need to be more agile, they need to change in order to fit in with the world. And especially COVID, they make people realize more that if you have something that works, but it's not user-friendly, it's much harder to do it via like remote, like Zooms over, like unless you're physically there. So a lot of the problem that they don't consider it as a problem start rising and rising more, and people are more aware of the necessary roles of making it user-friendly, having a design with people focus. That's kind of like emerging, but the job title is still not going into design engineering. It's still like other crazy names.
Yeah, I think that's, I really agree with that. I mean, but anyway, what about you move to Kevin? What do you think about that?
The job title thing is really interesting to me because like, and Luisa and I talked about this before this panel as well, like design engineering from my context really, it doesn't mean too much. Like, I don't know if I've ever, and I haven't been like looking at job posting boards that much, but I don't know if I've stumbled upon a lot of jobs that are titled design engineer. I have a friend who wasn't design engineer, but she did some kind of like UX and front-end web at Uber. But yeah, like those trends I think really haven't, there's a few trends too that haven't really reached the Valley. Like I'm sure everyone's realizing that I'm talking a lot about Silicon Valley, service design is huge in Europe, and it's like a term that people are comfortable with now. At least that's the impression I get. And it's really not something people talk about in like the entrepreneurship space or in startups in Silicon Valley. Like it's really something people don't understand. Like product designer is just the only title. And even if you own, like I literally met someone I think who was like, I own the getting in a car experience for Uber. And I was like, but your title is product designer? Like you work on service design. But to speak to the trends right now, like I'm not super, I don't know if my finger's really to the pulse still and like what's really happening on the ground, but I can speak to what I want to see happen. Like I really, like all this mindfulness stuff we were talking about for design, and Pei talked about too, like being multidisciplinary is really what a lot of companies or people are looking for, or what you need to succeed as an innovator. That whole thing, like for being multidisciplinary, like the industry, like tech industry, really feels like it needs to like recognize that. Like it's really co-opted so many things into like, and Silicon Valley has so much control over what happens. Like there are like 2 billion people on Facebook. There's just like, there's, I think like 35% of the US economy is like the FANG, right? Like the big 4 tech companies. And like that multidisciplinary mindset like applied there would really help those companies like not be such massive monolithic, like they're thought leaders just by how large they are, and they control so much of our daily experience. They, like, I would really urge a lot of people working in those industries to really think a lot deeper about like the implications of what they're doing, and taking like user-friendly design and human-centered design another step further, and thinking about like who are the people we're working for, and decentering yourself from that conversation. Like, it's really the people that we're working for, because there's like, on average, everyone in North America spends 1 hour on Facebook a day, which is crazy because tons of people I talk to about this. Yeah. A lot of people are like, no, I don't. Like, that's ridiculous. There's no way. It's so, like, Facebook doesn't have that much content on it, but you really are spending that much time. And yeah, just, I want to see, there's this book, Ruined by Design by Mike Montero, which is a very angry book, but it talks a lot about how designers have a responsibility, a social responsibility. And like, that's the trend I really want to see, because like some of my smartest friends and some of the smartest people I've ever worked with, like worked at Facebook, Uber, Google, like they went to these massive companies and work on product design or engineering. And I really want to encourage, and I do this a lot, maybe annoyingly over lunch and dinner to my friends, like for them to think more deeply about the companies they work for, especially like when it's really obvious. Like Uber and Lyft recently ran the most funded California like ballot prop ever. It was like 185 million or something, to convince people to not support, to convince Uber drivers to not have labor rights in the same way that a full-time employee would. And it's I don't know, it's just crazy how much power these massive companies have, and the work they're doing, and I really want to encourage my friends and my colleagues to, in the tech industry, to really think more deeply about all of that. Yeah.
Wow. You bring up very good point on social responsibility. I think we will touch upon on that. But what I hear, one of the things that I hear for sure is that we need design engineering, but we don't know, or we don't label that yet. But it seems like every industry needs that. So that's I think is pretty promising future. What about let's go to Luisa. I'd like to hear what you think about trends and challenge and everything.
Yeah, so there's actually quite a similar story in the film industry. I think it's really interesting. I can talk about the design industry. I can talk about this move towards multidisciplinary teams and multidisciplinary individuals. But I would say once design lands itself within other industries, when you have designers in software engineering, when you have designers in film, it's a completely different story. And if anything, things is kind of starting to move backwards. So film is already such a compartmentalized industry. Like, you have so many different departments and so many different sub-departments, and everyone kind of does their one very small thing, which makes things very, very efficient. It works really well to get films made, but I'm not sure it does anything for innovation in changing the film industry or making the industry better in any way. It's a well-oiled machine, and it works how it's always worked. And then that's starting to change slightly because of regulation. So, for example, within special effects, the people who were designing the rigs, special effects is all about the practical effects in the film. We do the car flips and the window smashes and the explosions and the giant rigs that are crushing things and throwing things and all of that sort of thing. And the people who made these used to be the people who designed them. That is traditionally how it always worked. And you would learn in the film industry through training and work your way up through the industry, gaining really hands-on experience. And now, more recently, in order to be designing things, and it makes perfect sense, in order to be designing these massive rigs that are throwing cars around, suddenly you need an engineering degree, which is great because you're putting people's lives at risk. So you need to make sure that what you are making is definitely safe, but it's created this huge disconnect where you have the people down in the workshop who are building things, and you have the people up in the offices designing things, and they've never spoken to each other before, and neither of them understands the other. So there's a lot of discontent down in the workshop where the engineers are upset that the people up there don't really understand what's going on and don't have a deep understanding of how to make things work. And then there's the designers sitting up there who have never touched a tool in their lives, who design things that are way too big and way too heavy because when it's on your screen, it looks like it's a normal size. Or they design screw holes in a place where physically you'll never be able to get your arm in to be able to screw it in. So then in the film industry, you really need design engineers. And that's kind of what people are looking for. Like Kevin and Pei said, no one's calling them that yet. No one really understands what they're looking for. But there's started to be an understanding that you need people who understand the maths, understand the physics, can make sure that everything's safe, but also have a creative understanding of how to actually make these things work and actually make interesting devices that will create the effects that you want on screen. And then to go one step further and to kind of mimic what Kevin is saying, there is basically zero social responsibility and zero consideration of the implications of your work within the film industry. The film industry has these huge, huge, huge budgets, and it uses this plethora of materials, and they've only kind of just started to think about the fact that they should even consider recycling this sort of thing rather than burning it down or chucking it in a skip. And even then, that kind of doesn't happen in practice. There are a lot of rules coming into place, but people aren't following them and people aren't practicing what they preach. So again, that would be something that I would really love to see come into the industry. Like once you get multidisciplinary thinkers, you get people who see things from different points of view, I think that's what can then lead to innovation. And innovation is what we need to start making these industries not only have their one single goal of make a great film or make a great product, but also understand what are we putting out into the world and what impact does that have on the rest of the world around us.
Oh, true.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, do you feel like it's like those people who are designing now and then the people who are building too, they just really need to have like a more open communication stream, like a conversation. And a lot of this too, in like the context that I was working, it's like, it's just the conversation really needs to be had, and there needs to be like buy-in from, I think, the top level. Because really, like when I was working on Facebook, like Cambridge Analytica happened, and a lot of people became very disillusioned with the company they're working for. It's like undermining American democracy, and they're doing crazy things, you know, around the world, encouraging hate crime, and just being a platform where that happens. And there wasn't any like top-down really like acknowledgement of, it just felt like change wasn't happening at the top level. And it's like, it's so hard, I think, inside private industry to make a change happen. And I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but I felt very powerless as an employee because there was so much amazing conversation about labor rights, and Facebook was talking about like the worker rights for the janitors and cafeteria workers really early. And now we're talking, like in 2021, we're really talking about like labor rights at Amazon and how terrible it is to work in an Amazon warehouse. And that just feels like to me like the people at the very top are hoping that they can brush it under the rug or like weather the storm. And to start the conversation, I think people are really willing to have these conversations, but they just need to be started. Like they need to make it into all of these contexts. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think like if we needed to make change, especially at the school or in the university level, there are two ways of doing that. So if we look at it as a demand and the supply side. For the supply side, it could be like a very top management level, and we might not be able to do anything a lot with that. But from the demand side, it means the children, the next generations, if we make them aware of what they needed, and they need like a mixture of skills, they need to be learning on the design and engineering at the same time to be able to excel in their career. I think it's something that achievable from our point of view. For example, we can have like a role model or something. It could be the startups companies, or it could be a researcher, it could be like filmmaker like Luisa. It could be anyone that just show them, okay, so this is what you get when you have a combination of skills. And this is what you need to be able to survive in the future career.
Yeah. I just wanted to tag on really quickly. Like earlier you were talking about your research project and how at the end you had to shop around for people who the material was for, right? I feel like that mentality is really, really bad in software, where it's like there's this build in there that will come kind of mentality. Like I know what's right and I'll build it, and if it's good, so people will come and use it. And it's really so backwards, but we're so close. Like that's really what the conversation thing to me is about. Like it's so incredibly close to being like, don't build it and they will come. First figure out what to build. And because like earlier I was talking about like how front-end engineers especially are doing so much implicit design, and engineering has so much implicit design baked in. Like, and it's just about being, recognizing that, understanding what it is. Like, yeah, there needs to be some kind of paradigm shift somehow. I'm not sure how that happens, but yeah, the build it and they will come mentality is just so like, Silicon Valley has its own kind of weird mandate. It's like co-opted all of this like, we're gonna make the world better, like counter-revolutionary type stuff from the 70s when they were really just hippies making software. It's not hippies making software anymore. It's like, you know, bros and people with with lots of money, deep pockets who, Uber had this like, I forget what they're called, like values, but one of their mandates really early on when Kalapnik was still there was like step on some toes. That's how you get stuff done.
Yeah,
and it's like, I don't know how anybody looked at that and okayed it. Like it was like just so, I know like, you know, you can't always like, I don't know, they're like, let's not always ask for permission. I'm like, I don't know, like you're really gonna go and put a car in everyone's cities or whatever that does this thing. Like it really feels like people who are gonna get in the car should really like have some things that they know about the car. Like, is something terrible gonna happen to me in this car? Like, is it gonna be safe? Like, is the person driving it gonna be paid fairly? Like, those are all things that's what happens when you ask for permission. Like, we work with the city and really find out like how to make it a functional part of the economy. Because like, I don't know if this is true still, but Uber was making 42 cents per dollar. Like, I mean, a couple of years ago, and because it's still running on funding, and it's just, I think it's not profitable still today, but a lot of these models are like, we're just gonna lose money, and we have this grand vision, but we're not gonna ask people about what it is. I think I'm rambling a little bit. But
No, it's okay. I understand. Now,
From people who build technology first and also find a usage for it as well. So I'm not actually that much different as I see, but when I was building it, the only kind of like small difference is the mindset. I was building an interactive way of play and go control. And I know genuinely in my heart that unless it is a toy, which I'm not sure that it's going to be profitable or not, unless this is a toy, I still need to figure out what industry it is. So I think a lot of the time where people build just the technology, I think it's still okay, but you need to like genuinely understand that people are not just gonna come and find your technology and use it. You need to go out there and tell people. And I think just go the other way as well, in a way that if you have multidisciplinary skills, if you want to be something along the line of design engineer, you need to start telling people that this is what you are, this is what you want, this is what you can do. Or else nobody would know that you exist or your skills, even though they hire you, they might not actually know what your full potential are because you never told them. And I think this kind of like a little different way of looking into things, to say, from my own personal experience.
yeah.
I think they are actually, they all in the same space, you know. You raise this point of basically social responsibility and working with people, which is that aspect, and of course to approach people, to approach the users. That's what Khun Pei touched upon, which is I think great for both. I actually want to come back just a little bit before we move on to the next part with Sasi, because we still haven't heard from you about regarding of the challenge. The opportunity in the design engineer for research and development part.
Yeah, well, let me begin with as an engineer first. Because Khun Pei mentioned like the COVID pandemic earlier and how that affects the whole career or the industry that's related to engineers.
Yeah.
I think affects mostly to the transportation and logistics of the products and human, because that's the most important thing. Once you are an engineer, you have to be physically right there in the plant or right there in the production line. And whatever happens right now for the past 1.5 years roughly, it really affects a lot on those industry. But so regarding like the 3D printing technology that I'm working on, I think it's actually a rise of that technology, because when we talk about how the logistic and transportation was interrupted by the pandemic, actually it doesn't affect much on the 3D printing technology. And that's because of the new concept of having your product open source. Like you can put that on the internet and then people can download it and then print it from home. And for the company or for the design studio or even at home that you have your own printers, you can just go ahead and print that. And that's what they call citizen supply chain. Because you don't really need your physical product to be shipped from point A to point B. You can just download the file, print it at home or print it at your company, and then you can still make your business going without being affected by the pandemic or the restriction of transportation. So that's an opportunity that I think is like a silver lining of the pandemic situation. And well, I think you just need to be creative and just need to be being a little bit optimistic to find what is the strength of the technology or what is the strength of your career that you're working on. For example, for people that has the 3D printer during the very beginning of the pandemic, what they did was, I actually can show that in the picture. In a second picture. So yeah, that's what people did at the very beginning of the pandemic, like beginning of last year. So instead of being just like getting all nervous and don't know what to do and okay, my business is gonna die, what they did was they designed, using the 3D printer, they designed a door handle so that people don't actually have to touch the door handle. They can just use their elbow to open the door. So that's something that we could do. And what the beauty of this product is actually because people decided and they put it up on the internet. So everyone else in the world who's facing the same situation of the COVID pandemic can just download that. Maybe you need like to edit it a little bit so that it fits your door handle, and then you can just print it out and then use it so that it can prevent everyone from being contagious of the common contact points of the door handle. So I think this is a very good standing point of how you just need to use your creativity into making the good for the community.
I see. I really like that idea. The first time I hear about the citizen supply chain, and that's great. That's good. We share knowledge, ideas together.
Yeah.
Wow. Actually, I'd like to ask maybe Luisa, you have anything more to share regarding on this question before we move on to the next part of the panel?
Yeah, I think there's actually been some really interesting points brought up that feed really well into current trends within the design engineering industry, because a lot of us love to talk about design as problem solving, and I think as a very base level definition for people who are first entering design, the idea of problem solving really makes sense and really helps you to get into a design thinking mindset. But once we move, especially like now the industry is moving slightly towards the definition of creating preferred states out of existing states, there are so many different types of design. So you get innovation-led design, and you get these sorts of situations where you might not necessarily have a problem, you might not necessarily have a user, sometimes you're just experimenting, sometimes you're doing like what Sasi's doing, and you're creating a system of 3D printing rubber. You don't really know what those applications are going to be, and you don't really know how it's going to feed into the world, and sometimes it becomes this reason to have multidisciplinary individuals, because once you have an understanding of a lot of different fields, once you get a group together that have a lot of different experience in a lot of different places, that's when you start being able to have the network and to have the ways of thinking to make you realize where these things could be applied. So there's nothing wrong with experimenting and trying to push innovation and trying to do things, even if you don't know where it's going to go or how it's going to impact the world. That's one of the reasons why we need different types of people, because some people might be able to create the thing and some people might be able to figure out where that thing ends up, which is things like 3D printing muscle, artificial muscle tissue, which is an incredible project that wouldn't have happened if Sassy hadn't been trying to develop a material and her friend hadn't been looking for a material.
Awesome.
Yeah, I feel like I've been really talking about like the social issues and being actually quite negative about the state of design in Silicon Valley, but there's a really good point too, like the multidisciplinary aspect of things really unlocks this incredible creativity that I think I'm still really getting a hold of, but like having experience in different things and really just, I'm in awe of like my classmates when they're making stuff a lot of the times, because it's like there's so many crazy ideas to try out, and sometimes like Lisa said, it's innovation led, and sometimes I don't know where the crazy ideas come from, but they just meld so many, like, it's wonderful like how much you can do if you just set out and you're like, I'm gonna design something to solve a problem, or I'm gonna design, I have these things I can do and I want to see what I can do with it. Yeah.
And I think we start seeing a lot more of these things in the normal traditional company as well, because people are bored, right? And that's the kind of like exploring more hobbies, more interests outside of work. And I think that's really helped expand the integration or like the mindset of adopting other bits and pieces from other industry in your day-to-day work as well. So I think COVID does have some positive spins on how the whole creative and design world start integrating into all companies.
That's for sure. I mean, well, we can talk. Maybe we talk about COVID. It will be a very long this session. So, but that's for sure. I think people adjust, of course, using creativity, design, engineering, science, innovation to this education. Now we touched upon the rubber part, and I believe that Kevin and Luisa has something to show with us, that you actually using your design, engineering, and innovation to tackle on the real life problem, and it's happening in Thailand too. Okay, so I think you have something to show us, and like to play with that video to show what they did, and then they're gonna tell us about it later. All right.
Co-design is a process where you collaborate alongside the end user of a product to ensure the outcome really works for them.
We're a group of design engineering students, and we've been working with local farmers and fishermen, Steve and Bang, to design something that improves their day-to-day lives, even if it's just in a small way.
A good co-design project starts with accurate need finding, from interviews, field research, and reading upon the subject.
Design is all about problem solving. We agreed upon trying to make something that could keep the rain out of the latex to preserve the night's harvest during monsoon season. The challenge was to make something very low cost out of sustainable or reusable materials that are readily available on the farm.
We experimented with different materials and ways of making.
And the whole project became this back and forth of learning, and teaching, and inspiring between all of us, making sure that the final outcome came from the people who would be using it.
And trying to show that design engineering doesn't need any fancy equipment. It's something that can be done by anyone, anywhere.
Awesome. I see a lot of activities, and actually, can you tell us what I see a lot of rubber trees, ต้นยางครับใช่
Yeah, I'll give a brief overview of what we did, and then Luisa, you can jump in anytime. But we were in Krabi in the south of Thailand, and we met Steve by chance at a store just because he had great English. And we were really interested in doing a co-design project in the area, and just kind of getting to know what issues the locals were dealing with. And Steve introduced us to his friend, Bang, who is a rubber farmer and also a fisherman. And during the rainy season in Thailand, the monsoon season, it rains and the water gets in you saw the cup on the tree is where like the
coconut shell.
right. It used to be a coconut shell historically, but I think it's a plastic one now. And the raw latex, like they tap the tree and the latex gets in the cup, but then when it rains, the water gets in the cup as well, and it ruins the latex because it takes a long time to dry. And so we spent some time like prototyping and doing some rounds of iteration and getting Bang's input and taking it to the farm. And it was really like a really fun experience. Luisa, I don't know if you want to say anything about it before I ramble too long.
Yeah, it was really exciting. Like, we came into it wanting to do a co-design project partially because design is the language that we understand. So one of the ways that I understand the world, especially as an interaction designer, is through interacting with it and designing with it and seeing what I can do with it. And I think for a co-design project, it's really, really important that whatever you're working on is mutually beneficial to the designers and to the final users. So it's not about coming somewhere and, like Kevin was talking about, being a savior and trying to say, we know how to do your job better and we're going to help you. It's more about trying to create this collective learning experience and trying to learn new techniques, learn about the local community, learn about how the world works in this side of the world, and at the same time trying to use our unique skills to leave that place better in some way than when we found it. So we started off just getting to know them, and it was really, really lovely finding some friends in Thailand, hanging out, going fishing. They taught us so much about their way of life and the things that they do. And then working with them and understanding, like, it was Bang who brought up the problem about the water getting into the rubber. And it's not like this isn't a problem that has somewhat already been solved. There are rubber tree guards available that you can buy commercially, but at the same time, when you've got 5,000 trees, it doesn't really make sense financially to be paying a lot of money for these plastic devices. And also they're hard to find. And in general, we've noticed that people don't tend to know about them. So what we were trying to do, rather than design an actual physical product that we could give to them, we wanted to develop a technique alongside the farmers of making rubber tree guards out of the readily available materials that they already have on the farm. So we were finding ways to cut up palm fronds and use rice bags and use things that they already had, so that you won't have to spend any money per tree. And I think one of the best things from my point of view out of the end of this project is that the final designs for the rubber tree guard didn't come from any of us. None of us designers knew enough about the ways of doing things here and the materials that we use here to be able to design something that was going to work absolutely perfectly. But what we did do was create a bunch of prototypes, experiment with materials, and again, expand our own skill sets working with new types of materials. And then that in turn helped Bang think about the problem in a different way. And in the end, based on one of the designs we came up with, he thought of a much better design that he's now going to be making alongside members of the local community who are working, doing weaving with some retired people, including his own mum, which is really lovely. And then again, from the other point of view, Steve, one of the other farmers, came up with another design, and we're going to 3D model that for him and 3D print that for him, so that we've kind of got this back and forth going where we can use our unique skills and they can use their unique skills, and all together we've come up with this final solution that should help them save some money and keep the harvest during monsoon season.
Yeah, I really feel like, Luisa, you said this after right after our final kind of chat with Bang and Steve before we left, but like it really couldn't have turned out better. And I was so happy that Bang was like, you know, I'm gonna continue this, or like I want to see what we can do with the basket weaving with the elders who are basket weaving, because it was like a thing they started doing after COVID, that retired people in the community were just basket weaving, like traditional Thai style. And yeah, the thing that I really want to stress for like the audience that's watching this, especially if you're thinking about getting into design, is like we've talked about a lot of heavy stuff, and But this project was just such incredible fun. Like I had an amazing time. Fun is really the word. It was also such a crazy experience. Like they took us fishing and we were standing out there. I have a screenshot on my phone of Google Maps, and the dot of where I am is like in the middle of the water. And we're going to the rubber farm and driving there myself to like check on the prototypes and really just like immersing a little bit and getting to see all these things and getting to know Stephen Bang, such amazing people. Just such an awesome experience. Like I had so much fun like playing with it and learning from Stephen Bang and the iteration process, and so glad that this happened. And yeah, I just want to stress that like design can be super fun. Like I did this project mostly because like I was like, oh my god, like when am I ever going to have an experience like this, you know? Especially like going to a rubber farm and chatting with someone who works in that, and the fishing trip was amazing, and yeah, I would have done this like, I'm so glad that I had an opportunity to work on this, because I think before I would have totally wanted to do this, I just didn't know that it would be like a co-design thing. I didn't have the vocabulary or like maybe even the guts to just show up and be like, hey, like you seem really cool, like how's life around here, and like tell me about it. And I want to learn about what troubles you have or whatever, and just also just getting to know people, and it's just such an awesome experience.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they have fun too. And actually, you mentioned that you share your location in the middle of the sea, or if you tell us the company of the mobile phone, I think we can get some sponsor next time. So I think that the internet is very good. Right? But anyway.
Yeah, I had better internet in the middle of that bay than I did like at the place we were staying. It was crazy. I had 4G, and I'm standing knee deep in water, and it's black all around me because it's like 3 a.m. That's when you have to go shrimp fishing. It was.
At least you know which way to swim back to the shore, right?
Yeah, so they did say that like don't wander off because people get lost sometimes, and the tide changes a lot and the land disappears. So I can swim though. Yeah. Well,
I'm very, very happy to see like all the energy coming out from Kevin and Luisa, because I've learned about this project like for the past month, and I know that you guys are working with the rubber farmers, producing like designing something, but this is the very first time that I saw your design and saw how you actually was working with the farmers, and that's very, very amazing, and I really like that. And I remember that there was one time that I had a meeting, like an online meeting with one of your colleagues, and they said that, oh, Kevin cannot join today because he's out shooting for the UNESCO project. And I was like, it's 9 o'clock at night. I was like, where is Kevin right now? So I was so worried, but I'm glad that you enjoyed the projects. And when I was watching the video, I like how you put like the local materials, try to making something of it so that at least the farmer can make that themselves when your guys are not around or when you cannot access to any other resources. And other than that, the way you work with the farmers, I think is a very nice way on how to guide them and let them learn how they can actually make something, being more self-sustained. And then for the very simple solution, simple problem that they have every day, they might not be able to think of the solution that's actually might be very close to them, but they haven't seen it until you guys like give them like a support and show them how to actually do it, and that's very amazing. Thank you. I'm saying that for like the Thai farmer community.
I mean, thank you, Stephen Bang, like for taking us to the farm and really being open to having this conversation. I feel like I learned a lot too. So, yeah, and also like at 9 p.m. like a lot of the times I went, it was kind of a lot like just being with my classmates all the time. So a lot of times I'm like, oh yes, I get to go to the rubber farm and check on the prototypes and just have a little time to like do some work and yeah, it's very, very nice.
Do you have, Luisa or Kun Pei have anything more to add on this?
Yeah, I was going to say from a design engineering point of view, this was also such an interesting project because we are so used to having our workshops and our machines and our tools and everything that we're used to working with all the time. And we found ourselves thrown into Krabi. We expected to be in Bangkok, but because of COVID, we were spending a bit of time outside of the city. And we didn't have any of the normal resources that we would normally work with. So part of it was just a challenge for ourselves of how do we work with a bread knife and some palm fronds and try and make something that can actually help these guys out? How can they teach us how to work with the materials around us? But also it's just a really nice opportunity to show that you don't need a bunch of fancy equipment. You don't need 3D models. You don't need all these different things to be able to start learning to become a design engineer. You can just look at the things around you. You can work with the people around you, make some friends, and decide to make something together with them and to collaborate with them. Understand that the people around you are experts in their own experience and learn as much as you can from them, and then use the things around you to try and make something that makes that life better. And I think that's, really wonderful, especially when things can seem quite intimidating when you see, people have 3D printers and people have CNC machines and people have all these facilities available for them to do a job like this. But actually, anyone can start doing a job like this. You just need to start thinking about it in the right way.
Yes. Yeah, I think please. Oh, your mic is mute. Yeah.
I want to stress out that these are groups of English speaker in Thailand, in a rural area where majority of the people don't speak English, they don't know anyone beforehand, and they made all these. So I think don't let your fear limits what you can do, because they come with nothing and they have created amazing things. And I think everyone have more advantage being in the local community, speak the same language, having at least more connection. At least you have a friend of a friend who knows someone, your parents know someone, your aunt knows someone. But I think even with super limited resource, they can still do this, and I think everyone can do it too.
Awesome. Then actually we're gonna move to the very last part, but before we do that, because I think we actually have questions from the audience.
Oh,
I'd like
great.
to hear what we think you guys think about this first, because that way we make sure that we answer. So the first question comes from คุณน้ำหวานนะครับ well that's Thai. Have you ever had time that you run out of new ideas? And how did you find your motivation or inspiration again? Yes.
Yeah. I'll take this first because I run out of ideas all the time. and it's really kind of stressful when you feel like you need to execute. But for me, I think it's been really wonderful having such great classmates in this program to go to be like, what tools do you have? Like, I ask this question to my classmates all the time, and I think my key takeaway would be like, don't be afraid to ask for help, and everyone's gonna have a different opinion of where your project should go or what you should do. But I think I've really gained a lot out of the conversations I've had with people. And the other thing that I've also really been rediscovering, which is funny because it's so ancient, but paper and pen. And there's this exercise I really like doing that was introduced to someone recently called Crazy Eights, where you come up with 8 ideas in 8 minutes. So you fold the paper into 8 pieces and you make 8 ideas. And I think the power of it for me is like, it's called Crazy Eights. You're like, these ideas are gonna be crazy and stupid and dumb. You only have a minute for each one to solve a huge problem. And for me, that really lets off the stress. It's like, really, take out the piece of paper and I know there's like something hard that you're trying to solve, but just let yourself go wild with it and let the juices flow. That's really helped me. Yeah.
Wow, that's very interesting. I think I will try that too.
It's fun. It's so much fun. And it only takes 8 minutes. So.
I think I faced that problem too, because originally I'm not like in design world. So when I have an idea, it was just like a very light bulb eureka moment, like, wow, I have a great idea. And that comes every once in a while, and I'm very used to that idea or great idea come out of nowhere. It lands from the sky and you have great idea. But when I pick design, engineering, or having idea as a career, then you need to start having a coping mechanisms or practice to do it. And then one of my amazing mentors told me that great ideas are hard work. You don't just sit around and ideas just pop up. You can only do so much with that and you stop having some, because the collective experience for your whole life, making you have that amazing light bulbs, creative idea moment, but you will use it up. You will use it up. So you need to commit to it. And one of the ways he was teaching me was that commit to it, that you're going to come up with great idea and do the labor work. Like even force yourself down. And his exercise was having a pen and continuously writing, like non-stop writing, even though you have nothing in your brain, just keep on writing. And that's kind of like dig up the inner, deeper thing that you might not have think about. And when you've done all those and nothing else work, stop working, go out, talk to people, do something else, gain new experience, experience like new things, talk to new people. Because if you're digging very deep down inside you and nothing's come out anymore, then it's maybe time to go find more from other people around you.
Yeah, I like to echo on what Kun Pei mentioned. Well, from my experience, when I run off my idea, it means that I did the experiment in the lab and it failed. And that's a very big disappointment to myself and my team. And so what I did was actually the same as what Kun Pei did. It's like I stopped. Like I told all my team members to, okay, we're done for the day. We clean up and then we go out and then we will come back later with a fresh idea. And what I usually do with myself is to recharge myself. And that would depend like on each one of us, how do you recharge yourself, right? But for me, I tend to surround myself with positive energy. For example, I will go see my friends who are very inspiring, who I know like every time I go talk to this person, I will get inspired. Or I can even go online, listen to TED Talk, go to some podcasts or YouTube or anything else. Like there's a lot of things around you that you can just go to and then gain the positive energy back so that you can come back and work more efficiently.
I think Luisa has something to add on that for sure. Seems like.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm one of those people that tends to really annoy people around me by having endless ideas. But I definitely have a lot of tools in my arsenal that I use to keep that moving. So like everyone has basically said, changing things is really, really important. Like good ideas don't come from sitting there staring at your screen, like come, idea. But you need to start changing things around. So one of the things I love doing is changing from the big picture to the small picture. So big picture being like, what is this entire thing? What is this solution? I'm making a robot, I'm making something. But sometimes once you hit a wall and once you're not coming up with anything else, then you need to go into the small picture and be like, I have no idea what this thing is, but I know that this tiny part of it is going to be pink and it's going to be round. And really, really working on the tiny, tiny little details and switching between thinking about the whole thing and thinking about the details really helps me to keep the entire thing moving. I think also not being afraid of failure is really, really important, because like any good design process is basically just failing over and over and over and over again until you manage to land on something that actually works. So not being afraid of bad ideas, not being afraid of saying every single idea that comes into your brain out loud to whoever you're working with, even if it sounds like the stupidest thing in the world, someone next to you might hear what you're saying and completely misunderstand it and understand it as something that's actually great. Or someone next to you might take one tiny thing out of the stupid thing you've said and come up with something amazing. So relying on the people around you is really, really important. And then again, when it comes to changing things, you can sit there with your crazy eights, you can sit there with your post-it notes and stuff like that, but sometimes you just need to move. Sometimes you need to go and grab some clay or go and pick up anything physical whatsoever and just start doing things and start being like, okay, I have literally no idea what I'm doing now. I have no good ideas, but I'm going to keep on poking this clay. And okay, that's actually an interesting shape. Maybe I could do something with that.
Awesome. Wow. Yeah, I think those are the ways I usually do as well. Now we have another question from Dr. Dongduan from Facebook. And this question actually will lead to the very, very last question of today, which is going to be that what do you want to leave for the students who want to pursue this career? So this question is that, could you please give us some idea on the difference between design engineering and product design, in terms of roles and academic background. Because I mean, I'm sure that students who are listening here or the audience, we got to start in some career, in some subject or some subject. So so that's the question. Difference, between design, engineering, product design, and then the role or academic background that needed for that.
I'll just speak really quickly because I think Luisa might have more insight on this, but a lot of my friends who became product designers studied computer science. That's the background they came from. And I feel like other design disciplines have much, I mean, my product design friends kind of self-taught design as well, but I feel like other things like empathetic design, human-centered design, like co-design, community-led design, these things might come from a more humanities-based background where you know, cognitive science and sociology and psychology and but design is really such a meld of different things. I would say that my school didn't have a design program, so it was really about finding ways to make your education relevant. And it was through a club, which is how all of my friends found a design career. We were in extracurricular activities, and we really enjoyed it. But yeah.
Yeah, I think let's go to, I'm not sure if Kun Pei need to leave at 11, is that, am I right? So I'd like to go
a
next.
little bit. I think in my perspective, all these have complementary skills or skills that intersect between all the roles. And I think in some country or in some setting that a specific educational academic setting are not there yet, you can collect these kind of like small skills along the way. It might be some project management. If you want to do like become a product design, you might need to think about that in additional to like just have a creative idea or solving problem for people. You might be collecting bits and pieces, but I think in a lot of the country and in a lot of company, all these different terms and roles are still being used as interchangeable, and everyone have different definition of what it is. And I think there's no one right way of learning it. You could be coming from like pure like artistic design background and gradually move into this. You could be someone who come from business administrations kind of worlds, looking into like whole big picture and gradually pick up other skills. You could be from like hardcore engineers, but I think it's about the interest that you want to be in these kind of like multidisciplinary-ish space. And wherever you start, you can start collect more skills along the way. And most skills that is useful in real life are not necessary from what you learn in school. School will give you tools and things that could be useful for you. They give you choice and array of things. But most of the people end up picking the tools that work for them. And talking to people who are in these kind of roles can also share with you their tools. And what I do is I pick a role model of someone having similar character to me and ask them how they've done these. What's their journey, what tools they use, what kind of like tricks and technique that they have. And I end up like asking loads of people like getting the whole like life into like a piece of paper. And I do this with everyone who like aspire to be. And I collectively start collecting my kind of like group of skills and techniques that work for my character. And I think everyone can do the same as well.
Awesome. Luisa, you like to add something on that? Yeah.
I had a really, really good answer to this question, and then Pei said all of it, but in better words. So yeah, I completely agree. Like, these words don't really mean anything when it comes to actually using them out in the field, because what I consider to be a product designer and what Kevin considers to be a product designer are completely different things. From my background, a product designer designs physical products that you might buy. And from Kevin's point of view, it's very software engineering focused. And from my point of view, I consider myself an interaction designer. And in my field, interaction design encompasses designing experiences that people will have in life and designing interactive artistic experiences and things like that. But lots of people understand the word interaction designer purely to mean a user experience designer when it comes to websites and apps. So I think, like Pei says, it's more about figuring out what you're interested in and what you want to do, and building up loads of hard skills and loads of soft skills and lots of different things to work your way towards that. But I would also say you don't necessarily have to be afraid of not knowing what you want to do. Like, I might have quite a very different ethos for lots of people, but one of my personal goals is to never have a good answer to where do I see myself in 5 years. Because from my point of view, if I can imagine where I'm going to be in 5 years, I haven't worked hard enough. And if I look back through the last 5 years of all my life, I've ended up in places that I would have never imagined being, because I didn't limit myself by what I knew already existed. I ended up studying subjects that I didn't know existed because that's where my path led me. So I think there's also a lot in, even if you don't know exactly where you want to end up, stop and look at where you've been and take stock of the things you've done. Take stock of those moments that you really, really felt alive. Take stock of those moments that you thought you were doing something really interesting and really worthwhile, and notice what is similar about those different things. And then start projecting that into your future and work towards continuing to find those feelings and continuing to doing something worthwhile. Because some of the most interesting fields and some of the most exciting technologies and things like that will not be taught to you in school. So you need to find them, and you might end up in places that you never knew even existed.
Awesome. I think,
I totally agree with Luisa and Kun Pei that like, keep looking for the skills, like collecting your skills, and it doesn't have to be in school, it doesn't have to be in a classroom. And so trust me, if you are in your generation, at your age right now, you have all the time and opportunities. We might not have that much time anymore. But right now you have time, so you just go out and explore. Find out, you might find your strengths, you might find your passion, you might find your interest, and that's what you've been looking for, and that's what's very important to me. And I like to share one term that I learned a couple years ago. It's called /career. It's actually like a person that has more than one job, more than one source of income. And that's because your interest and your passion might be beyond what you're doing in your day-to-day job. So you can have more than one job to fulfill your happiness, to fulfill your creativity. And that's when you need to go out and find what are those multiple strengths, what are those multiple interests that you have out there.
Awesome. Wow, I think today we have a lively discussion, and unfortunately, our panel discussion comes to the end. So at first, we would like to thank all the audience on Facebook Live that keep watching on us, keep talking about this, and then I'd like to thank all the panelists, the speakers for today so much. I don't know about you guys, but I really want to be a design engineer now, actually, so that's for sure. So thank you so much for following us, and we'll see you next time on the episode 3, on the panel discussion. So thank you very much. ขอบคุณมากครับ สวัสดีครับ